back, YouTube, to Jermon's Zone. I'm your host, Jermon, and today we're taking another look at the 1995 film, Dead Presidents. Now, the first time we looked at this film, we looked at the coming-of-age story for Anthony Curtis, the main character. But this time, we're going to look at his decision that he made to become a Marine Recon soldier during the Vietnam War, and how that's going to affect him for the rest of the story. Now, this war story that we're going to see, it was horrifying to me as a kid. I mean, had me up for days. Because the imagery of death and destruction, it really got to me. And you got to see a lot of the mental issues that really hit these soldiers at the time. And what they used to escape too. And it was just, it really set with me. You know, more than the other war movies I've seen throughout the years. But I also want to say I do apologize for the last review that I did for Dead Presidents. I just got some new equipment and it's picking up all the audio around and the echo. I apologize for that. I tried to edit it and it just was a hassle. But that's enough of all that. Let's get into the breakdown. The story picks up 2 years later from when Anthony escapes Juanita's place right into war in 1971. I mean, there's gunfire going off, there's bullets flying left and right, and he's trying to escape and get into cover because he's surrounded. Right? Him and his unit is surrounded, his Marine unit is surrounded by enemy combatants everywhere. Right? But Anthony's commanding officer, Lieutenant Dugan, decides to call in air support, which ends up coming and wiping out everybody that's hiding in the jungle. This works, and after this happens, Lieutenant Dugan decides, you know what, since we went through this intense battle, we need to go back and rally up the troops and head back to home base. Alright, since the mission was compromised. However, at this point in time, we get to meet Cleon. Cleon is kind of like the wild nut of the group, right? And kind of show you the type of mind state that these soldiers had when they were in these intense battles and they had to survive. But Cleon proposed the idea of actually investigating the dead bodies, which is a reasonable request because they are a recon unit and they need to obtain information, right? So Lieutenant Dugan listens to the request and decides that it's best to do that. Little does he know what Cleon has in store. So as the whole unit investigates the dead bodies, they end up finding, some souvenirs. Lieutenant Dugan stumbles across a captain that they were able to take out and find a belt buckle. Now he sees this as a souvenir and decides to take it, and even get some praise with some of the people around that, hey, you've been trying to get something like this since 1966 and you finally end up getting it, right? This has an effect on Cleon because Cleon is already off base. I mean, we even see him shoot up a dead body just for the fun of it. But since he ends up getting so jealous that basically the lieutenant had found something valuable out of this whole search, that he decides to create his own souvenir.
Oh man, what the fuck?
Creating this whole new souvenir kind of scares everybody because he takes a head with him, right? And this plays a big part on what Cleon believes and how he is set up, because we're going to have a discussion about how things are with him in his household when he was growing up too.
Man, that nigga Cleon crazy.
Yeah.
Did you see that shit?
I saw it.
Nigga, did you see that shit?
Yes.
After searching through the dead bodies, the whole group ends up making it back to home base. During this talk with Skip and Anthony, which, Skip ends up joining the military because his whole college career didn't pan out as he wished, but he is concerned about Cleon's action, that he's losing his mind, he's caught up in this war. But then the response that Anthony gives, Anthony doesn't really care. He's so numb by war that it's not really having a big effect on him. And with this, we start to see the connection with Anthony and Cleon. It's because their upbringings were kind of similar, with their morals being a very important part, with Anthony come from a middle class family and how he's trying to, how the family wanted him to come up. Also with Cleon, him being a preacher's son, and all those morals was installed in him. But being in this war environment, they became like these people who are just lost in it, and it's violence all day. It's caught into them, and it's hard for them to escape that, because they got to think, they take it every day at a time. They don't think about the future. They don't think about the back at home, because they got to survive. It's to the point where even Anthony has adopted the whole lingo of the military, because Skip is not really there. He's still fearing everything that's going on around him, while Anthony, he's telling him, I don't want any shit birds in my thing. That's a lingo from the military. So you can really see that he has adopted this. And it's also telling me that how people can really get this influence on Anthony. Like once he goes into a career or whatever, they tell him something, he adopts it. As we seen with Kirby, he adopts that lifestyle. In the military, he adopts that lifestyle, and he's in it all the way. But Skip is still worried about Anthony, and worried that he's been pre-programmed in a way where he can't even be civilized anymore. And he even just started discussing about the lifestyle back at home in the Bronx. Like, how has he talked to Juanita in a while? Like, what's going on with that? At this time, Anthony doesn't really want to respond, but he tells Skip that he did talk to her in his first deployment, but it seems like that's where it kind of ends there and stuff. And he tries to keep that world separate, and he even mentions that he doesn't want to think about the past, because but the problem is he got Juanita pregnant, and he doesn't even want to see his own daughter's picture of what she looks like and what she might be. And Skip is really trying to get him to think about this, because even though you are in these day-to-day battles, if you do get bad, then you have to deal with it. But I get that the fact that you never know if one day is going to be your last day when you at war and stuff, But that's what type of mind state Anthony has at this point in time,
Survived 26 months in the bush. Because I don't think about the world, Skip. That shit don't exist to me. I don't give a fuck about anything or anyone in it. Because the minute I do, I'm a dead man out here. And you remember that shit. We'll talk about the world when we get back.
And I think it's his way of coping with his reality. As for Skip, his way of coping is getting high. Now, we're going to see later on what he means by getting high. We don't see it at this point of the story, but we get into it and we get to see how that was a common thing during the Vietnam War, what soldiers used to do just to cope with their reality, their brutal reality that they had to deal with on an everyday basis. So after having this discussion with Skip, he finally decides to write back someone at home. And the first person he decides to write back was Kirby. This tells you how much of an impact Kirby had on his life. He didn't contact his dad. He didn't contact, and his dad was in the Korean War, but Kirby was too. But it seems like Kirby was closer to Anthony than his dad was. Right? Now, he could have even tried to contact Juanita, but maybe that would have drew something else out. But him not doing this, of not trying to contact Juanita and keeping touch with her, is, I feel like it played a major role of like how it led to his demise later on, you know. And he might blame other people for this, but he played a part in this whole factor in the story. Now, after Anthony sends off this letter, we get to see the unit go on another mission, right? And while they're in the jungle, they're all sitting down, you know, kind of cleaning up after moving around for so long. You know, even Lieutenant Dugan has a little knot on his head, you know, probably from the bugs that's biting him. I mean, it looks like hell, right? But Lieutenant Dugan finally speaks up and tells Cleon to bury the shriveled up head that he has in his bag away. Now, as I said before, he's a preacher's son. Now, I thought he was more on the Christianity side, but when we see this, we see him consider the head as good luck. That he's using that as a protection charm, right? So he has that type of faith where he's using that as a protection charm, that he even mentioned that we haven't got hit by no one ever since we got this head, you know? But it's starting to get to everybody. Everybody is not, you know, not liking the smell. The smell is just horrifying. Even though he's saying it's a protective charm, look, like I said earlier, Anthony, he's just so numb to the violence and everything that's going on. He was like, no, we don't need the charm. We just need our guns right here. And we're ready for anything. But with that being said, like, eventually, Lieutenant Dugan threatens his position. He was like, I will have you court-martialed if you don't get rid of that head. So, Cleon decides to get rid of the head and bury the head. Finally. You know? But he says, well, there goes our good luck. Sadly, he might have been right about this, because as they are discussing their next plan on their movements, they find out that one of their team members are gone, you know? So they trying to figure out what's happening, and they was like, he doesn't like anybody watching him while he takes a shit and stuff like that. But this is important about being in the military, is the fact that having battle buddies there, it plays a major role in keeping you protected and watching your back. And you see, we're going to find out why he didn't want someone there watching him. So, the unit moves out and tries to find the guy, and they end up finding him. But when they found him, they found out that he did step on an explosive device. Intestines is everywhere, you know. And even his penis is in his mouth. Now, that tells you what he was actually trying to do. He was trying to pleasure himself and end up messing up and getting himself killed in the process. Now, as a kid, I didn't know what was going on. I just thought the explosion was the cause of it. But now, seeing it, I understand why, because now I know the context of it. But, you know, they hit him with a shot just to keep him numb, to be able to move for medvac. But as Anthony is carrying him, the guy, he really starts digging in and just saying that I can't go home like this. I can't go home all tattered up like this. Kill me. Kill me. I would do it for you if you were in a situation like this. Now, Anthony initially does not want to do this. You know, he does not want to take out one of his comrades. But eventually it gets to the point, as they waiting for the medvac to get there, that yes, I don't want to go home tattered up like this. It would start to sit in with Anthony, and he decides to take out his morphine shot and give it to the guy, killing him off. After that incident with the dead comrade, we get to see the unit move on to actually doing another mission, a night mission, where they're exploring the jungle, and another explosive device goes off, killing one of another comrade. Guns start firing from all directions, and I will say, The gunfire in this scene is kind of funny because we see green light, and I was like, "All right, is that supposed to be the flash of the gun going off?" It was kind of weird, but we also see another effect that it has on Skip. As I said, Skip earlier, he doesn't want to be here. He's not really supposed to be here, but he freezes up, and he starts to hide. He's in shell shock with seeing somebody just explode in front of him. Dugan doesn't really realize this. Lieutenant Dugan doesn't realize this and calls out to Skip to cover him as he goes in to do, to actually combat his enemies. Since Skip is in shell shock, he doesn't pop up to cover him. Dugan gets gunned down, right? And the gunfire gets worse, and they're being like kind of suppressed down to the point where Cleon decides to tell everybody, let's move out, let's get out of here. Anthony has to go over to Skip and basically dig him out of that shell shock and basically get him back home, because if he didn't, he would be stuck there to die. And he basically came for him so they can leave because they're so close friends. And after that, they make it out of that situation alive. Now, I will say, I can tell this scene is supposed to be intense, but I didn't feel like it was as intense as the first battle. Now, looking at it now, because this is supposed to be like, I think probably the most intense battle one of the most intense battles in the movies, but I feel like the one earlier was even better. So, after that, they do make it out of that situation alive. And we get to see 6 months later where basically we get to see Skip being sent home. They're all celebrating, grouping up, that they made it through this crazy deployment. And, everybody's just happy and celebrating. And I know we don't really get to see it. And that was one thing, is that I was disappointed that the immediate aftermath of that, because they lost their commanding officer and what that might have an effect on people. We didn't really get to see that, and I wish we did, since it jumped forward 6 months and we only got to see the last celebration before Skip had left the war. But that's the end of the war part of the story. And I would say that the war part, I always felt like it was longer. It was only 20 minutes, and it really felt like, as a kid, it was an hour, So it's a lot, like, my perspective is different on the war aspect of the film. I would say that it did its job of showing the change in our main character. I will say that. The action scenes wasn't just blowing me away, because I've seen all these action scenes before with all these war movies I've seen, but it got its point across. And I will say that, especially with the change, it was more on the impact of who the characters were and how they were affected by the war. And it's very similar to the Bloods book. That's what they were trying to communicate. That how impactful was this war on African Americans and Latinos during this time, and what effects they have on them. I forgot to mention their other friend, Jose. He ended up going to war, and he ended up damaging his hand, and he ended up being sent back. So he's back home while they all still going out. But yep, that completes the second part of our review of Dead Presidents. Hope you enjoyed it, and go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button, and tune in next time so you can see the rest of this review and breakdown of Dead Presidents. I'll be your host, Jermon, and I'll see you next time. Peace.